talk about the qualities of a highly effective manager, a technical manager. So I want to talk about a few things I've learned over the years. I've had some amazingly great technical managers. I've had some people who will eventually become amazing. And I've learned from observing people in the places where I was an employee. I've observed people, places where I'm a consultant, but I see and I work with technical managers. Personally, I am not a manager. I intended to be never a manager. That's kind of the path I chose. So it's easy for me to talk about it because I'm able to observe and learn, and rather than trying to bring myself into it, but to really see what have I learned from others that have influenced me and made me realize how great they can be. This also is a few things I've learned from my own bosses over time, and something that I think we can learn from if we shift our frame of mind. So I'll talk about a few mistakes I've made along the way, but in the process, I've really taken the time to learn from them as well. So with that said, let's move forward. I'm going to give you 12 practices to take away. And the first practice I'm going to talk about is be adaptive, not reactive. And this is something we have to take the time to get better at. You may be a technical manager. If you are, that's great. You might be a director. You might be a team lead. You might be an architect. You might be in a leadership position in other ways. It, to me, doesn't matter. You don't have to have a title for you to lead. And every one of us could be leaders in different ways and different places. And so the question here is, how can we be effective as a leader in that case? So the first recommendation I have is be adaptive, not reactive. So I wanted to talk about how does it feel to write software? And I was struggling with this, and I was sitting down, and I wanted to really come up with a metaphor. And as I was struggling to come up with a metaphor, I was writing the book. This was a while ago. I was writing the book, Practice of an Agile Developer, and I wanted to start the book by describing how it feels to develop software that's very different from a lot of other professions. And the closest I could think of eventually was that I compared software development to surfing. Anybody in the room who surfs? Nobody. So I can tell anything I want about it. That's great. So, well, when it comes to surfing, I don't surf either, so that makes it even easier. So when it comes to surfing, what I've learned from surfers is that you don't wake up in the morning and define a steady plan of how you're going to surf. You don't say, this is exactly how I'm going to surf. Well, whether you're going to surf or not is even not sure, because the current conditions can change very quickly. And surfing is not the same in every location in the world. In fact, surfers choose different locations because they're all different. So what comes close to software development is surfing, because there's a lot of unpredictable things. Your requirements change all the time, like the environment around surfing. And likewise, when you're surfing in some places, you not only have to surf and know the condition, there will be sharks as well. And you're nodding, you're thinking about your boss when I say that, right? No. It's the users, maybe, the requirements, the environment, everything put together could be the sharks as well. So the point really is that it's an environment that we need to be careful about. So as I mentioned, I was writing this practice as an Agile developer. So essentially, I have a small thread running in my mind, unfortunately. And the thread in my mind thinks about software and development and profession. These are the things that run on my mind almost constantly. I'm multi-threaded. And there's one thread always spinning. And as I'm going around, I think about things, I put things on social media, I do this all the time. But this was years ago. My children are grown up out of the house, but they were much younger at that time. And my wife and my children were on a trip. and we were sitting down having lunch. And as we were having lunch and having a good time, that background thread was processing some other information. And as my two boys were sitting next to me, I pulled my phone out of my pocket and I started posting a social media message. And my wife was sitting across the table, so obviously she couldn't see what I was typing. But my son was sitting next to me, and he leaned over, looked at what I was typing, and he said, "Oh my gosh, Dad, I cannot believe what you're typing." And he looks at my wife and says, "Please tell Dad not to post this on social media." And my other son immediately looked at us and they both are looking at me, and they're like literally in shock. And my wife, knowing me, she's like, okay, he's going to do it no matter what. And my son is like, Dad, please don't post it. But as a parent, you know this. Your only life and mission is always to embarrass the children. So when he says don't do it, that's when you do it. So I immediately clicked on it and it said send. And within seconds, it started being retweeted and reposted. And he said, I cannot believe it. This was so wrong. And why so many people are retweeting it? And what I posted was the following. And I posted that I've set the wedding date. I've not asked her out yet. How software projects are managed. So there is this guy who goes to this lady and says, honey, we're going to get married on June 7th. Here's the hotel we're going to get married. We're going to have 3 children, 2 girls and 1 boy. Here's where they're going to go to school. And he goes on and on and on. And she looks at him and says, who the hell are you? And that is how software projects are managed, right? Because they tell you when it will be released, what the scope is, and they tell you everything, and they say, oh, by the way, we're agile. What is there to be agile when you have set everything on stone? And unfortunately, this is how software projects are managed, because we tend to really define all of this without even taking the time to understand what are we supposed to build. And when you start building things is when you discover the complexities of what you're building. So the key about software development is adaptive planning. And if we don't really encourage adaptive planning, how could we succeed in a software projects? So to me, that is the essence of software development, is to be adaptive. So software development is feedback-driven development. So you want to be able to engage in this feedback and evolve based on this feedback continuously. And the word plan is a very interesting word, because plan is both a noun and a verb. And as a verb, this is a very powerful word. I have a plan to make. I am going to plan. I am devising a plan, right? As a noun, there's a plan we created. As a noun, it's almost useless, because the minute you create the plan, it becomes obsolete. As Eisenhower said, plans are nothing, but planning is everything, he said. So that planning is extremely important, because that's how we learn and we adapt. So plans are nothing, planning is everything, as he said. And that's a very wise word to learn from. And this is why, since planning is so important in agile development, we plan continuously. And we call that adaptive planning. So the essence of agile development is adaptive planning for that reason. And so planning is so important that we plan continuously and practice this as adaptive planning. So rather than saying, this is what we decided, I want to stick to it, be very proactive in adapting the plan as you learn further. The next thing I want to emphasize here is, we talked about be reactive, be proactive, not reactive. The next thing is, use carrots instead of sticks. This is another thing I'm a huge fan of. If you are trying to threaten your team or impose on them, if you don't do this as an ultimatum, well, the morale is very low on the projects. I was once asked to come and help a team in northern Texas, let me just say. And I was there on the team, and I saw that the developers on the team were not having a good time. They were struggling between, do I fix bugs or do I write features? Well, the more they were doing, there was more bugs to fix. And the manager had a big stick, and it would go around, boom, right? You will do both. And I want to have this move faster and faster and faster. And I spent about 3-4 weeks on the team, got to know the team a little bit, and the developers were genuinely good people. But I was able to see, sitting shoulder to shoulder and working with them, and I found their struggles. So I went over to the manager, closed the door, and I said, "Hey, Don, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Yeah, what's up?" "Well, I just want to see what you think about the team." "Oh, bunch of idiots. They need to really get their act together." I'm like, "Well, actually, I worked with them for a few weeks now. I think they're having real struggles with it." And we're having a conversation, and suddenly he says, "Venkat, you don't understand my philosophy." I said, "Okay, there's a philosophy here. Let's talk about it." And he said, and keep in mind, this was middle of Texas, so you got to be careful hearing these words. And he said, "If I put a gun to your head and say, run faster, you have no choice but to run faster," he said. That's his philosophy. And I said, "I'm really sorry. If you put a gun to my head and tell me to run faster, my thought is how to take the damn gun away from you and shoot you back." And that's what your team is doing right now. You did not help them. You've threatened them. And that's not going to help you. And so a lot of times we don't understand that humans are not machines. We're not going to produce good results if we are not motivated to produce good results. If I come in and I'm under tension, I'm stressed out, I'm going to do a poor job. When I am active, when I'm happy, when I am bright, when I am not stressed out, when I'm not tired, I'm going to do a better job. And that is a very fundamental. And sometimes we don't understand that. And in this case, I would rather motivate them than threaten them. Some use TDD extensively, right? You know this, right? What is TDD? No. Yeah. Threat-driven development. They do this, right? They practice TDD. They're like, "If you don't do this, no bonus for you. You can't go home this weekend. You know what's going to happen," right? That's TDD. That's not the type of TDD you want to practice, right? It's a threat-driven development. And that's not a great environment to work in. And it's not a conducive environment to be in. So what can we do? I often say, seek better results through motivation and support. Here is a way to think about it. I would say there's a reason why we've been given two hands. One is so we can lend it for the person here to lift them up. And the other is to ask for help and be lifted up. And that's the beauty of where we live. None of us are on any extreme at any time. We're always in that middle. Somebody is giving us a hand to help us out. I'm here not because I'm smart. I'm here because there are kind people around me who lifted me when I needed it. And that's my turn to lift the other person up as well. And we are in this chain all the time. I am being helped while I'm helping somebody. That's why we have two arms. And so if we're part of a team where we can seek the help and be given when we want it, and to extend the help and give it for whom they need it, I think we can be a better team and we can collectively work in progress. So as a manager of a team, as a leader as a team, that's a culture I want to create. A culture where everyone uses their hand not to point fingers, but to extend the arm and say, "Let me help you. And here, please help me. I'll give you my hands. You lift me up now, and I'm going to give you my hands to lift you up." So it's not about whose fault it is, but to collectively work together to accomplish the results can make a really good culture and team to work with. This is a lesson I learned the hard way. Match position with personality. And I'll admit to you this. I was working on a project. We had a developer who was terrible and couldn't get anything done. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a disaster. We are moving really good. The person is dragging us back. And so I know this person is absolutely useless. So my boss comes over one day, sits next to me and says, hey, got a question for you. Like, well, what can I help you with? Well, I want to ask you about this person. What do you think? I said, oh, really not useful to the team. Can't function. And he said, yeah, that's what I thought so. I'm like, yeah, finally you're recognizing how terrible this person is. And then he looked at me and said, so what do you think this person is good at? I'm like, what? And that's when I realized what an amazing human he is and how much I have to learn. Because he didn't probe into, tell me more how terrible this person is. The question was, tell me what this person is good at. And I'm like, wait, you just shifted my perspective. I was focused so much on what this person is not good at. And you came, sat next to me, my boss, and said, tell me what this person is good at. And I said, give me a couple of minutes to think about this, because not what I've been spending my time thinking. And I said, well, this person is really good at this. And my boss said, that's been exactly my observation as well. Thank you, that was helpful. I just wanted a confirmation. I'm going to go find a position for this person where they can really shine. And I was like, wow. And the person was superb in the new position. A lesson I learned really in a humbling way from my boss. Einstein said, if you tell a fish, I'm paraphrasing here, Einstein said, if you tell a fish that it's only smart if it can climb a tree, it'll die trying and feel stupid. That is the lesson. I am not going to be good at everything. You're not going to be good at everything, but you're going to be really good at what you're good at. And the key for a good leader is to tap that. Not to tell you suck in this position, but you will shine over here because that's your strength. So if you have a team of players, what would you do? You wouldn't tell a player to play what they're not good at. You're going to ask them to play the role in which they're going to do the best for the team. And that is entirely the idea. So as a leader, your job is to find the strengths of people and tap into it and see if they can excel into it. That's the lesson. So I was talking about the employee that was really struggling and couldn't really do the job. And my boss was asking, what are the key strengths? Where would they fit? Where can we place them? And it totally blew my mind because it was a different perspective. The result, not presence. This is another story that I learned, which again blew my mind. Just to give you a background about it. I live in Colorado, but I teach in Houston. I've been teaching remotely for about 18 years. I've been teaching in total for about 34 years now. But I was in Houston teaching for about 20 years. I teach part-time. And I went down to Boulder, Colorado. I absolutely fell in love with the mountains. Went home, told my wife, we're moving. And she thought that was a good joke. Because I had a lot of connections in Houston. And about 20 years after living in Houston, I said, I'm done with Houston. We're moving. And we picked up our stuff, moved to Colorado. So I always tell people, I've been remote for longer than people use the word remote when it comes to work. I've been remote for 18 years now. But when I was in Houston, I was working during the day as a developer, like a lot of us, and I was teaching part-time in the evening in the university. And so I would go to campus after the school is closed, the office is closed, because I was always teaching the evening classes. So I would go in when the department is closed. I would teach, evening 5:30 to 7. I'll hang around with students until later, and I'll go home. So I never met the faculty because I was a part-time faculty. I've always been. And so as years go by, at that time I was already teaching for about 20 years. And I was this part-time guy that all knew about, but nobody saw him other than the students who would see me, but the faculty wouldn't see me. But as you know, universities, time goes on, things change, and they have a new chairman of the department. And I know there's a chairman, I've never seen him. And the chairman has never seen me either. So one day I was on my client site when I got an email from the chairman. And the email said, "Oh, dear Venkat, we have not met in person, but I've heard about you. I'm the chair of the department. I need to talk to you. Please make an appointment with my assistant." So I immediately called my wife and said, "I think I got fired." And she said, "Why do you say that?" "Well, I got an email from the chairman. Why would he want to talk to me unless he wants to fire me?" And she's like, "Yes, finally you'll come home on time, right? This is great." I kind of suspected maybe she called him and said, "Fire this guy," right? So I'm like, okay, so the chairman wants to talk to me. I'm going to go get fired. It's okay, not a bad thing. It's a part-time job. I can, do something else in the evening hours. So I go to see him. He greets me and says, "Oh, come on in, Venkat. It's great to see you. I'm sorry we never had a chance to meet in person." And remember, I was a lecturer, right? Not even a lecturer. The lowest grade you can think of. So I'm sitting there in front of him. And then he says, "Well, I want to completely revamp the undergrad program." And I'm like, "You mean I'm not fired? Or maybe this is a long story to tell why I'm fired." Anyway, I'll listen, right? "And we want to completely revamp the undergrad program." I'm like, "Oh, I think that's a great idea." I mean, this is the boss, right? I think it's a great idea. "We want to bring state-of-the-art industry programs into our department." I think that's a wonderful thing. That's a way to stay current. I'm just feeding into him, right? And so for that, we really need a director of undergrad studies who has industry experience and can drive the program to the industry standards. And I said, "That's unconventional thinking, but yeah, I agree with you." And so we're going to hire a director of undergrad studies with industry experience. I said, "I promise to you, whoever you hire, I'm going to work closely with this person. I will give any support you want. I will do everything I can to assist this person." "Oh, yeah, thank you. But I extended the offer to this person, but he has not accepted it yet, so I'm waiting to hear." I said, "Okay, let me know when you hear." "I'm waiting too. I'm just waiting to hear." And I said, "Okay, I'm a little slow." And I looked around. "Are you talking about me?" He said, "Yeah, it's your job if you want to take it." And I said, "Oh my gosh, I did not come thinking of it." I didn't tell him I was going to get fired. "I did not come thinking of this. But thank you, but I have to tell you something. I travel around the world. I go to client sites. There is a reason I teach part-time. I'm almost never here. So I feel really horrible that you asked me to do this." And then he suddenly said something I will never forget in my life. He said, "Hang on a second." And he said, and remember, this was 20 years ago, right? 25 years ago. And he said, let me correct you here. And he said, "I didn't ask you, can you come to work? I asked you, can you get the work done?" I will never forget that phrase, right? He said, "I didn't ask you, can you come to work? I asked you, can you get the work done?" And I looked at him and said, "I just accepted. I'm going to be doing this." And I still travel the world. And we changed the entire curriculum. I was the first director of undergrad studies who was not even a tenured professor. This was unconventional. Universities never would do it. And he went to the dean and said, "I'm hiring this guy as a director of undergrad studies." They're like, "Who the heck is he? He's a lecturer. You don't question me. That's what I'm doing." And he did it because he realized that he can make the change. And I said, "What makes you think you can hire me to do it?" He said, "Very simple. I looked at every evaluation for the past 20 years. And the guy who gets the best evaluation is the guy who doesn't even show up to the campus. And everybody here doesn't get as much score as you do. It's very clear from the data, you're the guy." I'm like, "Okay, since you've done your research, I'm going to work with you." And we did. We completely revamped the curriculum. But he taught me a very important lesson. It's not about if you show up to work. It's about, can you get your work done? And that was a thought that he had in his mind such a long time ago, right? And you can look at it from the perspective of today's world, right? Work from home. Or where do I work from? The key is we're missing the point. It's not about where you are. Some of the people that I've worked with, absolutely great, are the people I've never met in my life ever. I've got the best editor in the world. I've written so many books, and when I sign up to write a book, the first thing I say to the publisher is, I want to write this book, but on one condition. This is the editor I will choose. They're like, why do you keep choosing her all the time? Because if you work with her, you will know. That's what I say. She's that good. Jackie will say, I'm calling her at 2 o'clock. My wife is like, okay, see you after 4 hours. She will just start on the call. Let's look at this page, and we'll just go in. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about so many details I never even thought about it. Thank you. And she's just educating me on how to rethink and how to rewrite. And I've never met her in my life. And I speak to her all the time on the phone. And we work so well. She's always like, oh, if they tell you to edit your book, I'm on. I'm like, no, I'm writing the book so you can edit it. So she's that good. Once you find the right kind of people to work with who are motivated, it doesn't matter where they live, if you've ever seen them, if you will. So it's not about showing up to work. Can you get the work done, is the question. Work smart, not long and hard. Another lesson I learned from my boss, a different boss this time, in a different situation. This was in a company that I was working in. And I worked in companies where if you are not at your desk at 10 a.m. on Saturday, your name goes into a file. I never cared about it. I'm like, I'm not here to report on time. That's not me. So I used to work in a company. Monday morning, 10 o'clock, my boss will sit there. John, you were working so hard on Saturday. Thank you for doing it. My name will never appear in that list of people who showed up on Saturday. I'm like, nope. I'm a workaholic. I just don't work for the company. I just work on stuff I care about. So I will write code for my company, and I'm writing books. I'm writing articles. I'm helping students. I'm doing other things professionally. I'm not going to keep writing code for my company. That's not me. So I work long hours. I just don't care to go to work to write more code for the company. That's just me. And so Monday morning, there's a list of people who showed up on Saturday. I'm like, nope. I'm going to put in every ounce of my effort when I'm at work. But when I am done, I'm out of here so I can do other things in my life. So I switched my job, and this was my very first day in my new job. And I'm sitting and working away. But this company had a very different culture. They actually went home in the evenings. And I was my first day off the work. I'm sitting and working away on my computer. And my boss at the new company walks around. This is actually my boss's boss. And he comes around, and he literally, puts his leg, sits on my table next to my computer and says, oh, so first day, huh? How are things going? And I kind of lean back in my chair. I'm like, well, I was looking at this. I'm getting used to these systems. I'm doing all these things. And then kind of listening to me. And as he's listening, he kind of reaches over and turns off the monitor. And then I looked at him and said, Dave, you turned off the monitor. He's like, yeah, I know. And then I'm like, but I was in the middle of writing a code. And he looked at me and said, Venkat, let me tell you something. Nobody is going to steal the work from you. I promise to you, it'll be exactly where the cursor is in the morning when you come back. You can start on it in the morning. Let's go. I'll walk with you to the parking lot. I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, we don't work late in the evenings. We come to work for a reason. We work, and when it's time to go home, we go home. So let's go. I was like, wow, this is very different. Maybe I don't have to come on Saturdays after all. We released better quality software way on time in that company than any company I worked in. You know why? Because when people came to work, they know they're not coming on Saturday. So they put every ounce of their effort during the time that they spent. It was a complete difference in mindset, culture. So they worked smart. They didn't work long and hard. That was the difference. So we didn't care about who worked the weekend. That was not the goal. We managed the time more effectively. He said, no one will take your work away from you. That's what he said. That's your job. You're going to do it tomorrow when you come back. Go home now, was the message. And when you have a boss that gives you that kind of message, it changes the way you work, changes the way you think, changes the way you put effort into it. I'm not exaggerating to you. Fast forward 2 years. This was a professional work. I was working as a software developer. But on the side, I was still doing some research. And that was part of my extension to my PhD. And I was still working with my professor even after I graduated. And I wanted to publish a paper in a conference. So I went to my boss and I said, hey, boss, the same boss in this case, and I gave a slip. It's a vacation slip. I said, hey, I want to take a day off. And he looks at the paper. Oh, day off. Where are you going? Oh, I'm going to Las Vegas. Oh, Vegas, huh? I didn't realize you gamble. Like, no. It's a conference. Oh, a conference in Vegas. Like, no, seriously, it's a conference in Vegas. And he's like, so what's this conference about? Oh, it's related to my PhD, nothing to do with work I do here, but we did this research. I'm going to present this in the conference. Oh, so you're going to Vegas to present this in the conference. Tell me more about this paper. And I'm just explaining it to him. And as I'm talking to him, he takes this paper, tears it into pieces, puts it in the trash can. And I said, you just tore my vacation slip. I said, yeah, I tore it up. No vacation for you. I said, but Dave, I have to go for this conference. It's related to my research. And my professor said, I need to go submit it. Otherwise, I got to ask him to go. And he looked at me and said, I didn't say you cannot go. I just said no vacation. And I said, unpack this for me. What do you mean? He said, okay, I'll make a deal with you. Tell me if you learn anything when you go to the conference, anything. And if that's going to be remotely useful for us, promise me you will not use it in your work. I said, oh, why would I want to promise that? He said, exactly. Get out of here. I know you always sit there and keep working all the time. And you want to go to Vegas for a conference, you need a vacation? That's part of your work. Go. Don't just tell anybody that you're going, that's all. I'm like, wow. What a concept, right? It's not related to my work. It doesn't matter. Everything is related to your work. You're a professional. That was his idea. And when you have people who are that focused on outcome, you work very differently for bosses like that. You're not a bean counter because they're not a bean counter. That makes a big difference. So the result-oriented, rather than the time you're spending on it, that becomes a difference. Address problems, don't affix blame. Address the problem, but don't affix the blame. When things go wrong, what is your thought on your mind? Do I focus on fixing the problem, or do I find whom to blame first? Let's find Joe. Joe caused it. Let's put everybody in front of Joe in front of everybody and make sure that everybody knows it was Joe's fault, right? So I came across a manager. When something goes wrong, he would organize a meeting. And everybody comes into the room. And he says, we have a problem in production, and I caused it. And I need your help to fix it. That's the opening statement. And suddenly people are like, what? You're not asking who caused it? You're not going to hunt this person down? And he's like, I caused it, but I want your help to fix it. And all of a sudden, you completely took the focus away from who was the cause to what the problem is. And so the motivation now for the team is, let's go hunt the bug down, rather than let's be defensive. How can we cover this up? And that is a very interesting way of leading the team, is to focus on addressing the problem rather than affixing the blames on people. This is one of the places where it's important to remove the them versus us. Always I keep an ear for these conversations. They, those business people, we, the programmers, those testers, wrong conversation. That's how we get into an environment where we are fighting each other rather than working together as a team. So ask the question, we are a team, we're in together, how can we collectively improve, fix problems, and make progress? So the idea here is not them versus us, it's us. We are the team. Sometimes I go to companies and I tell them, you know what? You don't need competitors. They're like, really? Because you do the evil thing yourself, fighting so hard between each other. So you make sure you don't progress yourself. They don't need to really help you to go slower, right? And that's kind of weird when there's so much internal fighting that you don't realize your competition is elsewhere, not internally. And the politics really kills it. So it's a one-team mentality. We are all in this together. Let's work together on this. And to build that culture, to cultivate that in conversations is important. And when it comes to change, ask the question, how can I facilitate change? A lot of times, our approach is this. You started saying, I am going to try this idea. And guess what? You run right into a wall. That's what you do. Boom. What do? You got to find an alternative way. You hit another wall. You got to find a detour. This is how life is. This is how work is. You constantly have to keep finding detours. Nothing works the way you planned in the beginning. You start, you got to retract, find another path. You hit a wall, find another way. Keep going. So when you tell your team you want to accomplish something, don't just tell them do this and walk away. They're going to hit wall. They're going to run into difficulties. No matter what they try, they're going to run into difficulties. So the question is, how can you support them? And the way to support them is to say, here is a person who is good at it. I'm going to bring that person as a coach. That could be an external person, but it could also be an internal person. I used to work in a company where we had a guy who was absolutely amazing. And we went to the team and said, he is amazing. Our team needs help. Can we borrow him as a coach? So he can come and help us for a while before we return him back from this loan. And so this company had a practice of borrowing people between teams. We do this all the time. My boss will come to me and say, I want to remind you, you still work for me, even though you don't come to office to my team anymore. And 6 months later, you're coming back. You remember that, right? So don't assume you've been transferred. You have not. You're on loan. We did this a lot. We would borrow somebody from another team. I would go to another team, and we'd be crossing back and forth because the teams wanted to provide support to their people. We didn't say, we want to accomplish this, go, do it. Well, sorry, I don't know how to do it, but David knows. Okay, David, come on over, help me out. And we are learning from this person very quickly. So to provide that kind of flexibility is a great way to help the team move forward. So you're keen on sustainable agile practices. You want to sustain the pace of development over time. How can you sustain the pace of development? You need to be getting really good at it. It's a skill set you need to develop, right? And so we need to have that mentality to be determined to succeed. So you're saying, we're going to hit roadblocks, we're going to have trouble, we're not going to know how to do it, but we are in this to succeed. And in order to succeed, we're going to find motivation, we're going to find help, we're going to find guidance, so we can use that as a way to move forward and not an excuse for not having it to fall back. And that is something we can do to facilitate So if you're a leader and you want change, just don't tell the team, here's the change I want, but help them with it. Bring the people that will lead you towards that goal. And these people, not just people who can talk about it, but people who can actually do it and can then help the team hand to hand and move it forward. That can help a great deal. So bring in a coach, internal or external. Come up with a plan and commit to that plan and know that there'll be ups and downs. Know that it'll take time. But if you put your effort into it with the support, eventually we'll succeed because we've seen that happen. Prefer alignment over agreement. This is something I remind myself a lot. To ask somebody to agree with you is a tall order. Those of us who are married know this already. It's very hard for two people to agree on something. How can you expect an entire team to agree on something, right? That's really hard. And so I don't ask for agreement. But what I ask for is alignment. If you're working with me, you don't have to agree with everything I want to do, but you need to align to go in the same direction. If you and I are not aligned, we're going to pull each other in a different direction. Your methods may vary. I would like to do it this way, you want to do it the other way. But guess what? We both want to get to the same place because we are in alignment. So, and I'll be emphatic about it. I care a lot about alignment. If I'm not in alignment, I remove myself from it. As an example, I was working for a company. This was the worst time. We had recession in the country, back in 2004, actually. And the US economy was really bad at the time. And I was a consultant on a project. When my boss at that company said, we're going to bring in a consultant to do these things. And I said, I couldn't be happier. Yes, this person is awesome. We need extra help. And I'm selfish. I want to learn from this person. And he said, hey, what do you think of this framework he's been developing? I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Don't go there. No, but what do you think of the framework? I said, that's the best framework I've ever seen. Beautiful, amazing. Yeah, what do you think of us using the framework? I said, no, don't do that. Don't talk about that framework. We got work to do. So please hire the guy. Let's get this done. Oh, but Venkat, you need to look at this feature. I said, if you're really, really particular about it, let me give you a suggestion. Let's work hard. Let's release the current version of the product you're working on. Once you release it, you tell me what framework you want. I will work with the guy you hire and we'll bring the framework in where it makes sense. But don't touch the framework until the current release. So a few days goes by, he comes over and says, I got news for you. I'm like, tell me. We hired and he accepted to join. I said, you know what? I cannot tell you how happy I am. This is amazing. It's going to be great. We're going to work so hard. We're going to get this released. Oh, by the way, as part of the hiring contract, we signed a deal to use this framework. I said, just tell me you said this to make me angry, but it's not true. He said, nope, it's true. I said, if that's the case, I just resigned. He said, I just told my boss that's exactly what you're going to say. I said, at least I'm predictable. We're done. I immediately got up my chair. I packed my stuff. I said, you don't need me. What you need is a person who is aligned with you. What you don't want is me coming every day to work and saying, don't do it. You need somebody who will run with you. Wherever you're running, that's what you need. And I'm not going to be that guy because we just fell out of alignment. And as a result, I'm no longer right to be on your team. So we're done. And I walked out. And the reason is you want the team to be in alignment. Otherwise, it becomes a tug of war every day. And you don't want to give a chance for it. Whether they succeed or they don't is not the concern. But the leadership has a goal. My job is to be in alignment with the leadership. If I'm not, I need to get out. It doesn't matter. It's not about me. It's not about me having a job. It's about what's right for them as a team. I'm no longer the right member of the team, no longer aligned with it. So the key here is alignment. So rather than sitting and arguing endlessly with people, agreement is a tall order, requires synchronization, requires conformance. Focus on the why and where are we heading. That is the key. If you're lifting a heavy TV, they both be aligned as to which room they're taking it to. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard and a broken TV after that, right? So we are lifting that heavy thing. You got to be aligned where you're going. That's very important. And that's the alignment you want to really explicitly ask in your team. Are you aligned with the goals that we are seeking? And so everybody is facing one direction and going that direction rather than pulling in different directions. That alignment is needed. I cannot emphasize this enough. The people who quickly lost my respect in leadership are the people who played politics. This is the best way to lose my respect. I've had some really, really good bosses, but the day they lose my respect is when they show that they put politics in front of profession. That's the last day I respect them. Because to me, this is the worst way to live a life. So don't play politics. Because politics makes everybody's life miserable. And rather than working towards a goal, we are trying to dig hole for others to fall in constantly. That's a very negative environment to live in. And you realize quickly there are genuinely people who come to work because they want to do some good work. I worked with those people who seriously say, you know what? I'm here because this algorithm keeps me awake in the night. I'm here because I want to try out a different data structure I learned about. I want to try these other ideas I came up with. That's what they are keen about. They just don't care about politics. When they talk about it's like, I'm sorry, but that's of no use to me. I'm more interested in tinkering with code than hearing about who said about whom about what and all those gossips. And that is something we need to think about as a leadership. You'll be a superb leader if you avoid dragging your team into the politics of the company. You will earn the utmost respect of your team when you do that. Because your team begins to realize that you're a professional and not a politician. So many employees simply don't care who is right. I'm sorry, I don't care who is right. I care what is right, not who is right. It doesn't matter. You could have given me this idea or she could have given me. It doesn't matter to me. But the key is that I know what the right solution is. They want to get the work done and go home. And they are genuinely interested in focusing on their work and succeeding. I know people like that. I've worked with them and I know what they're going through. I used to work in a company where you go talk to somebody, they would say, you know what? Tell me how I can help you. Don't tell me stuff I cannot help you with. If you complain about him or her, nothing I can do. But if you tell me what I can do to help you with this problem, I'm here to help you. It completely changes your mindset, how you work with people. Politics costs morale. It costs trust. Why? Hey, you are talking about him to me. What do you talk about me to the other person? I always, when somebody comes and says, let me tell you about Joe, I'm like, what are you telling me about me to Sarah? That's what I'm thinking. Because you want to gossip about somebody to me, why would it be that you gossip about them to me and not about me to somebody else? Which means I'm going to hold off telling you things because I don't want you to go talk about me to the other person because you lost my trust. I want to build honesty and trust in my team, not lack of trust. It costs respect. It costs focus. Rather than working on the problem, we are working on politics. It costs our productivity. So this is something we tend to forget sometimes. But when you realize, I don't need to be playing politics, it makes a huge difference. And you don't have to have somebody tell you, don't play politics. It's your choice. You can be the person who doesn't play politics. And they realize, if I want to solve problems, I'll go to him. If I want to talk politics, I'll go to that other person. So they won't come to you for politics anymore because you don't give them the encouragement to talk politics. And you can politely say, I know those are concerns, thank you for saying, but I really want to focus on this because this really is bugging me. I need to fix this problem. So keep drawing them to the problem, taking away from politics. They get the clue eventually. You're not interested in politics. So leave the politics to others and focus on working for the outcome. And this leads to a greater amount of productivity and success in the teams as well. And I've seen this work also. Truly care about quality. Quality is not something you can suddenly put into a team and say, boom, I want quality. This is something I want you to think about a little bit. Because I've spent a time thinking about this. I was very fortunate to have people in my life who taught me good things at a fairly young age. And maybe not directly, but they made me realize these things quite often. I travel around the world. I go to airports. And I find people having a hard time climbing staircases. They're huffing and puffing. And I ask the question, why is it so hard to climb staircases? I'm respectful. There are some people with a good health problem. I can understand it. But why that many people? Why is it so hard to climb a staircase? The statistic says that 60% of Americans cannot pay a $400 bill if there's an emergency. 80% of Americans cannot retire at a reasonable age. Why can't 80% retire? The answer is extremely simple. We think of the short term. We don't think of the long term. You go to the 20-year-old and say, you need to maintain your health. And they're like, you see how I am? I don't need to maintain my health. You need to save for retirement. Retirement? That's way over there. I'm in 20s. I don't need to think about retirement. So we think of the short term. We don't think of the long term. But what happens if you don't think of the long term? The long term eventually arrives. And when you wake up at 55, 60, and you realize, oops, I need to save for retirement. Think about this for a minute, simple logic. How much do I have to save when I start saving at 20 years old? How much do I have to save if I start saving at 57 years old? This is simple math. You don't have to be a calculus major, math major to do this. Simple math. So when I'm in my 20s, if I think of, what am I going to do when I retire? I would need some really good wealth. What if I start putting a little bit away? We call it sacrifice. That's a trade-off. I don't have that money to spend, but I'm going to save it. Hey, but I got this bug to fix. I got this book to write. I got this talk to prepare. Yes, but how about 30 minutes at the gym? Oh, but I don't have time for it. Well, what happens when you have no health for it eventually, right? So it's a trade-off. Yes, I have a lot of work, but I can give that 30 minutes to go to the treadmill. And if I do, I have to huff and puff when I'm older. I can be agile as I walk around and I run through the airports or stairs. This is something we tend to really not think about, and we ignore quality in almost every aspect of life. And if I ignore the aspect of quality in wealth, quality in health, quality in code, and suddenly we are getting near the release, let's put in quality into it. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. Quality is not an on-off switch that you just drop it into the code and suddenly you got quality. And I'll tell you one thing that just blows my mind. When we don't have a skill to develop quality, it becomes harder to build quality even when we need it. That's the unfortunate situation we live in. So it's very hard to catch up. It's hard to catch up health. It's hard to catch up wealth, and hard to catch up code quality. To me, these are not independent of each other. To me, life is software and software is life. There's so much that you can go back and forth. Things I do in one, I can use in another. And so we need to think about it. I can't wake up in 60 and say I want to be wealthy. I have to start doing that in my 20s. I cannot wake up in 60 and say I want to be healthy. I got to start doing that in my 20s. And that is something I have to start building. If not 20, it's got to be at 30s. If not 30s, it's got to be at 40s. But today is the day to start, both health and wealth and code quality, right? So deterioration is exponential. And it gets really, really worse as time goes on, pretty accelerated, if you will. So I'm going to say a generation of developers may have grown to ignore quality, partly due to their business environment. But the biggest concern is the lack of skills. Thank you. I love it when the feedback is like, when I say something really good, there's a music that plays. If you can give the name, I'll put the music director's name after the talk. That'll be good. But the biggest concern is the lack of skills that they have failed to develop to care for quality, even when they're placed in a situation that either facilitates or necessitates the high quality. And so to me, the problem is not that we didn't do it. The problem is we can never do it because we never took the time to get that quality, the skill. Build a team that is aligned with your quality goals and work towards it. Stay technical. I cannot emphasize this enough. I know you're thinking, wait a minute, I've got so many burdens already. In addition to it, you want me to do this too? You're better able to assess risk, schedule, estimate, and keep an eye on quality if you're technical. If you're ignorant of technical details, you are under the mercy of what people tell you. You cannot relate to it. Some of the best managers I've had are super technical people because they understood the problems, both at the business level and the technical level as well. So the last thing I will mention to you here is ask and understand why. This is the most important question. Why are we doing this? You'd be surprised, actually. So I'll give you one quick story about this before we go further on this. So the story is I was asked to come and help a company. And I went there and they told me, we want to implement this technology. And we know you're good at it. I said, thank you. I'll be happy to, but I got one question. When you're done implementing this, can you tell me how it helps your business? Tell me how it helps your users. And they looked at me and said, what do you mean? I said, you're going to make all these changes. You're going to spend millions of dollars. When you're done, how does it help your business? How does it help your users? And they called their boss. And they said, Venkat is asking all these questions. And he said, what are you asking? I said, I asked them, how does it help your users? How does it change their experience? How does it help your business? How does it help them to get a better revenue? And he looked at the team and he looked at me and said, I'm really shocked. We've been talking about this for 6 months and nobody asked this question. And he looked at me and said, I'm really sorry to tell you this. We don't need you anymore. You can go home. I'm like, yes, thank you. I got fired. I went home happily. You know why? Because I didn't waste their time solving a problem they shouldn't solve. And the next morning, I saved this email. Next morning, he sends me this email, and this is the email he sent. It's easy to get so close to a problem or have been working with the stuff so long that you can lose perspective and what the real goals and the issues might be. I removed the director's name and the company name, but I saved it for later use. This was a company you hear in the news from time to time. It's a very big company. And that was their director's email to me the next morning after he sent me home, saying, I'm still shocked that you came and asked us a question we never bothered to ask. We never asked the question, what's our goal? We were so eager to solve a problem in a certain way, forgot to ask, why are we solving? And that is shocking, but you need to have the courage to ask that question. Why? Trust but verify. Ask team to justify decisions. Tell me why we should solve this problem. What does it do? I want a business reason to solve the problem. So we talked about several things here. Be adaptive, not reactive. Use carrots instead of sticks. Match positions to personality. Results, not presence, that's important. Work smart, not long and hard. Address problems, don't affix blames. Facilitate change. Prefer alignment over agreement. Don't play politics. Truly care about quality. Stay technical. Ask and understand why. Hope that was useful.